All right, it's 6 o'clock. There's still some folks coming in. Good evening, my name's Tony Craig. I'm a planning consultant working with Warmington Residential, who is proposing this project. I'll repeat myself a couple times because there's still some folks kind of piling in. So why don't we just give them a couple minutes? And while we're all doing that, I'll kind of introduce myself, the team, and review a protocol that the city planner who's in charge of this project, Steve Le, who is with us. And I'm going to unmute Steve just in case I'm missing something that I should not miss. Steve, feel free to speak up. And I'm unmuting some folks that are on the design team so they can quickly introduce themselves. And then we can begin the presentation. And we've got a good amount of folks now. Let's give everyone else that may be interested in viewing at least one more minute. And Brendan, can you hear me, Brendan Quinn?
Yes, I can hear you.
There you go. Thank you. And Steve Le, am I coming across loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you too.
Great. Good evening. And then Jason of CBG is with us. Jim Rendler of For the Future Housing. I'm unmuting you so you can.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Jim Rendler for the Future Housing.
And Josh Reed. Good evening. Mary Cardin of Vandertunt Associates.
Good evening.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. And then Mr. Tom Jess.
Yeah, I'm here. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. And then let's see, Robert Lee of William Hesmholtz. And for those that have joined, I'm just making sure that the design team members can be heard when it comes to introductions. So that's all we're kind of doing right now. And we're giving other folks another minute or so. But Steve, I think what we'll do when we hit 6:04, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, of course. This is your meeting.
Okay, great. And then Robert, are you with us? Robert Lee?
Yes. Yes, I'm with you guys.
Great. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. All right. So I think I'm just going to get started. I will do my best while I'm getting started to continue to admit people that are queuing up in the waiting room. Good evening. My name is Tony Craig. I'm a planning consultant that's working with Warmington Residential, which is the applicant for this project that we're calling 2855 El Camino Real. And that's located at that address, right on El Camino Real. And with us tonight, we have some members of our design team. I'm going to introduce them as I see them in the waiting room. And if you all would do me the favor of simply stating your name and the firm that you work with and the portion of the project that you're responsible for, that would be, I think, good information for the members of the community that have taken the time out of their busy lives to join us this evening. So the first one on the top is Mr. Robert Lee.
Good evening. Our portion is the townhome in the back portion of the site. And we'll be covering that portion of it.
Yeah, and William Hesmholtz Architects obviously are the architects for that portion. The next person is Brendan Quinn. Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, this is Brendan Quinn. I'm working on the affordable housing portion with For the Future Housing.
Thank you. And the next person is Drew Wallstrom of Warmington.
Hello, I'm Drew Wellstrom. I'm a forward planning manager with Warmington Residential, and we are responsible for the townhome projects behind the affordable housing.
Thank you, Drew. Let's see, Jason Neary, CBG.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jason Neary from the CBG. We're the civil engineers associated with the development project.
Thank you, Jason. And I think, let's see who, this list is getting very long. We've got a good group tonight, which is great to see. Jim Rendler.
Sorry, Tony, can you hear me now? I wasn't able
I can, go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, Jim Rendler, I'm Vice President for the Future Housing. We're the affordable housing developer for that project component.
Okay, and in a moment, everyone, I mean, if you haven't had the time to look at the link and, you know, some of the project submittals that we've made to the city, we'll get to a site plan in just a second, and we'll have plenty of time to go over the two portions of housing, or the two different types of housing that are proposed for the site in just a minute. Next is Mary Cardin of Vandertunt Associates. Are you able to unmute, Mary?
Yes, good evening. My name is Mary Cardin. I'm with Vandertunt Associates. We're the landscape architects that are working with the townhome project.
Thank you, Mary. And then the guy that runs the show, the guy that tells me what to do, Steve Le, he's the project planner for the city of Santa Clara.
Good evening. This is Steve Lee, associate planners, project planner for this, representing city staff today, as just listen in and just garner your public comments. So go ahead, Tony.
Thank you very much. And I think we have one more gentleman, Tom Jess. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Tom, and tell everyone what you've been working hard at.
Yeah, good evening. This is Tom Jess. I'm with Eris Studio Architects, and we are working on the affordable housing component.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I think we're going to get started in earnest here. Again, I'm going to do my best to keep an eye out on the waiting room. We have Cindy coming in. So if I come across a little distracted, I'm looking at three different things at once. First, just want to go over some of the protocols for the Zoom meeting that Steve's asked me to look at. I'm going to move this window over here so I don't miss people coming in. I think most of these things I have covered in just the setup, Steve, but let's review a couple things here. We've done all of these things before the meeting. During the meeting, at least for the presentation, I'll be the primary speaker. We've already covered the introductions, and the meeting is being recorded. And when after I'm done with the presentation, we'll start the Q&A period. And what you can do for those that are more or less adept at Zoom than me, there is a box at the bottom of, oh, great. Looks like Sherilyn came in. Hey, Sherilyn, I've got a positive note from her. She's made it. Congratulations. So that chat box, if you've got a comment, you can go in there and make a comment. Drew is going to help me keep track of that. So when after the presentation is finished, we can make sure that anyone that had a comment or question is called on. I will unmute you, and we can have a discussion and field your questions. If you are joining by phone and not an iPad or a computer or a laptop, you can press #9 to raise your hand. I'll see that. Drew will help me so that we make sure we don't miss you if you're attending by phone. So those are the protocols. Let's get started with the presentation. And Steve, you're on unmute. So if at any time you want to make a clarification, anyone on the design team, Drew, don't be shy, just speak up. So The main project sponsor of at least the townhomes is Warmington Residential. We'll go over both Warmington and the For Future Housing in separate slides here in a minute. The overall project is referred to as 285 El Camino Real, and it's composed of two different housing types. One which would front El Camino Real would be 65 senior apartments. These senior apartments are 100% affordable, and we'll get into the detail as to what level of household income those apartments will be affordable to. And behind the senior apartment building will be 23 townhomes. A little bit of history on Warmington. Typically when I give presentations, I don't always read every word. So in some of these slides, I will summarize those. We can always return to those if you want to go back to the detail that I've included in the presentation. So Warmington has been around for a very long time, since the late 20s in the state of California. They are a privately held builder. They have a very kind of distinguished history, and they've been in Northern California for some time. I did include some projects that you might already be familiar with or not. There's the Avant in Walnut Creek, Tyrella and Waverly and Mountain View. We can kind of go over the site plan of Avant here in Walnut Creek. As you can see, it's a smaller infill project, residential, and this is what the architecture or the housing product, as we call it in the industry, looks like. And that is, I think, just recently sold out. The other one is in Mountain View. This is the site plan for Tyrella, also an infill piece, just off of Fairchild Drive, and of course Tyrella, which is the project's namesake, and Interstate 101. And this is what the architecture and that housing product look like for that project. And then the last, which I thought was another good one, because it's in Mountain View, is called Waverly, another smaller infill piece, actually down the street from Tyrella. And this is kind of what the central courtyard looked like. And this is what some of the townhomes look like at that project. So that'll give you an idea of at least two that are very close to this site that you could always look at. For Future Housing, as both Brendan and Jim mentioned, is the affordable housing developer for the affordable senior apartments. They are very adept at affordable family housing, senior, single resident occupancy. Some of you might know that, heard the term SRO. And that is a partnership between Jim and the general contractor that's been in the business a very long time, at least 3 decades, by the name of Eshelcon. They're in Campbell, and they do both affordable housing and market rate, and have done so for a very long time. There's a couple projects that are nearby and recent, more importantly. Both are in Santa Cruz. One is called Water Street Apartments. That's 41 units of senior. There's also family units in that, and there's also some disabled housing within that 41 unit total. The other project also in Santa Cruz is called Riverwalk, and there's 21 family units there. In this presentation that you'll have access to, there's websites to both Warmington and For Future Housing in the presentation. This is what the Water Street Apartments look like that I mentioned in Santa Cruz, and Riverwalk. Both are managed by Eden, if I recall correctly. Some of you that may know a little bit of affordable housing developers will know that name. So a little history on the project, and we'll get into the site plan in a minute. The recent plans that we submitted an SB 330 application, which notifies the city that there are some waivers and or concessions that we may be seeking under the state density bonus law. And there's certain materials that have to be submitted with that application. And it is a separate application. The other is a vesting tentative map, and the other is an architectural review plan submittal. All of those were submitted between the middle of March and the middle of April. And we're actually expecting our comments back from the city and other relevant agencies that review plans this week. So the timing for this meeting is really good, and you're actually being brought in before we even get comments back. So we do look forward to your input. The way that we've organized the presentation is by the location of the site, the land plan, the setbacks, the landscaping, and some of the details, as well as the detail behind the proposed homes and the redevelopment plan. We've also done some shadow studies and some renderings that we're going to show you in just a minute. So this is the site that I'm sure that many of you are aware of. El Camino Real is a heavy traveled corridor, and I recognize some of the names in the waiting room. It looks like we've got Nushin coming in, so I beg your pardon. I'm going to let a couple more folks in. And so, like a lot of info parcels, it's very tight. So there's a lot of things to be allotted for, obviously the housing, but also circulation, streets, landscaping, parking, etc. This first building that I'm waving my hand over, and I'm looking at my chat room, no one's indicating that they can't see it, so hopefully you're following along. This would be the area where the 100% senior apartments would be sited. They're proposed at this location. And then the 4 buildings that you see, buildings 2, 3, 4, and 5, are the townhome buildings. Okay, there's a main north-south drive off of El Camino. The entrance to the senior parking garage is here, and I can increase the size of this so it's a little easier. And then the drive aisles to the garages for all the townhomes are located on these east to west connections to the main street. Okay. This is the project site in proximity to the bus stop. Some of these are rapid transit stops, which are important for folks living here, be it the townhomes or the senior apartments. And when we get into the Q&A session, Jim and or Brendan will comment on this particular type of affordable housing, being senior housing, and how important it is to have public transit nearby. This next slide is also a Google Earth image that shows kind of a greater context of the site within the city between the Lawrence and St. Thomas expressways, just down the street from Koreatown, and the various elementaries, middle schools, and high schools, as well as parks that are very close to the site. And this is just some detail on which schools, which parks, and a proximity to different types of bus stops that I showed in the slide. Quick reminder of the site plan so we can kind of get a mental image of the various buildings. The setbacks. The senior apartment portion of the community would be built just behind the sidewalk of El Camino Real and would include a ground floor commercial space that would support the senior apartments. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A session about how big that space is and how we envision that space occupied to support the senior housing facility. The townhomes would be set back from adjacent uses and the senior apartments in keeping with zoning standards, except one area next to the rear of a single family lot. And I'm going to point that out because I know Cheryl Lynn has emailed me and she's got some questions there. And this is the one area I'm talking about. Everywhere else on the plan, we abide by the setbacks per zoning. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's kind of close right there. The townhomes would be 3 stories and would represent a transition between the senior apartment building and the single family homes to the rear. This building is 5 stories, and these buildings are 3. Some of these will have the option to have a mezzanine and a roof deck, and we'll go over exactly where that roof deck is and where that element that would be taller than 3 stories is located within the building or on top of the building. The garage parking for both the senior apartments and townhomes is oriented to the interior of the site and away from the street view. Landscaping. 31% of the community land plan will be landscaped. Community open spaces serve as landscape buffers between the senior apartments and townhomes, as well as between the townhomes and the single family homes to the rear of the property, minimizing the potential building mass related impacts to the adjacent existing single family homes. The landscape paseos between 3 and 4 and on the front door entry sides will enhance the residents' living experience. And that's the one area that separates the townhomes from the senior building, obviously, is here. The landscape paseo between the 2 buildings and the front door entries, and the larger area here between building 5 and these 2 single family lots is what I'm referring to in these 2 bullets. Parking. The community land plan will avail 51 parking spaces for the townhomes, where 46 spaces are required. And the project will avail 33 parking spaces for the senior apartments, where 91 are required. But it should be noted that this represents an increase of 28 parking spaces from the first proposal. When we first proposed this, there was actually 5. And that may not sound like a lot, but typically these types of units do not generate a lot of traffic. And the 91 space requirement that the slide indicates in the code is not for seniors. That's just for standard housing. And in addition to increasing parking for this portion of the project, this area had to be increased. And so what happened is we went from 26 to 23 homes. So that was a particular comment that planning was keen on increasing. So we did. But again, that did have a cost of 3 townhomes from the 26 originally proposed. And that's just, symptomatic of what is challenging with infill development. There's not a lot of wiggle room. And I think you get the gist for the rest of that. So this building is the rear and front elevation for building 5. And what I'd like to do is kind of go back and forth from these elevations to the site plan so that you can understand which building these elevations correspond to. So this would be the garage side. This would be the front side. This is building 5. And so this would be the garage side, and the front side again is here. Okay. And so you can kind of see how these corner buildings step down. And Robert, if I'm not mistaken, these elements of the building that are taller than the 3 stories that the homes would otherwise be if a roof deck option wasn't selected, these are the top of the stair to avail access to that roof deck. Is that correct, Robert? I better check his. You're unmuted now, Robert.
Oh, great. You are correct, Tony. Those are the stairwells to the internal, and then also the option to the roof deck.
Okay, thank you. And then the other buildings, which are more similar, are elevated in this way. These are buildings 2, 3, and 4. So this would be the front door entry elevation to those homes. And this would be the garage elevation. So wherever you see a paseo, a landscape paseo, these would be the front entries. And again, those are elevated this way. So some of those, or all of those 4-story elements, to the extent they would ultimately exist, if that option was selected, they would be set back a good distance from the edges of the buildings. Just wanted to make that point. And then last but not least, the senior building. This is how that elevates. I wanted to include some of the detail on the colors and materials, and I can increase this so you can get a good sense or a better sense of how that building elevates. So this would be that ground floor commercial face to the building on the ground floor. And then the units would be atop that. Okay. These are some renderings, and I promise next time when we do this, folks, we'll have more trees. But we were trying to get all this together on time for the presentation tonight. So this would be an example. I mean, it would, and you know, and Mary, you're probably, you know, wanting to let everyone know that this would be landscaped very differently, and we can go through your plans. But this is how these buildings would look and feel from a particular vantage that would be here on the site plan, right? So that's about right here, okay? And that's the vantage for these renderings. And this is at the top of the street looking down towards El Camino Real. And you can kind of see how those are set back from the edge of the buildings. Okay. And just a view, it just gives you a sense of the verticality, the separation between front doors, and that area that would be landscaped in a much more detailed way. We can go over the landscape plans if anyone likes. And then some of the shadow studies. And I want to make clear that in this, and this is something that Steve caught when we were reviewing this, this indicates 37. There will be certain elements of these buildings that could be as high as 44. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware that I wanted to make sure that you were aware that I understand that there's a difference there. And to the extent there's any material difference in this shadow study, we can certainly revise that. But this is how it looks in the springtime at 9 and noon and 3 in terms of the anticipated shadows from the buildings on the site and the adjacent properties. This is middle of summer at 9 and noon and 3. Everything straight up, some minimal shadows. And in the winter at 9 and noon and 3, right around the 21st. The proposed neighborhood consists of a 5-story senior apartment building with a ground floor commercial space and 3-story townhomes, with some having a 4-story optional roof deck on a mezzanine level. The maximum building height of the proposed senior apartment building is 60 feet. And the maximum height of the townhomes with roof decks is 44, per my previous mention. The transit-oriented mixed-use combining zoning district, TMU, has a maximum height of 50 feet. We have requested a waiver under the state density bonus law to allow the height for the senior building located on El Camino Real. The 3- and 4-bedroom townhomes will legally be condominiums with an HOA that finances all maintenance of building exteriors, landscaping, amenities, private storm drainage, private streets, parking, and a C3 treatment basin. And while I touched on that, I want to point out where that is. And that's up here in the site. Just, another very important feature of communities nowadays for stormwater treatment. The community will include the required number of accessible units, or 3 units, at the ends of building 5 and 1 at building 4. I'm going to point those out real quick. And the reason why we selected these 2 buildings for those accessible units or ADA units is that this is where the bulk of the parking off the main street is. Okay. Affordable housing. The community will exceed the inclusionary housing ordinance with 65 apartments total, one of which will be reserved as an unrestricted on-site manager unit. So 64 will be restricted to seniors according to the following affordability levels. This is actually 57. There's 3 more units there. 57 will be affordable to households making 60% of the area median income or below. And 7 units will be restricted to 50% of the area median income. Again, this is 57, and 7 is 64. Such a restriction shall be for a minimum of 55 years. The affordable housing may include an estimated 8 units reserved for disabled individuals. Again, a product type that for the future housing is experienced with, as in one of those 2 Santa Cruz projects I showed you. The ground floor commercial space will support services and facilities to the senior apartments. Okay, now some detail on the 2 housing types. There's 15 3.5 bath with 2 car side-by-side attached garages. Those 15 3-bedrooms are approximately 1,893 square feet. The balance of 8 townhomes are 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bath with the same 2 car side-by-side attached garage and are approximately 224 square feet. That totals a little over 65,000 square feet. There are 23 class 1 biking spaces, bike parking, and 4 class 2. The class 2 are off the main street. And again, there's 84 total parking spaces. The senior apartments, there's 13 studios. Those are about 414 square feet. There are 8 1-bedroom apartments, and those are 506 square feet. And the ground floor commercial space is roughly 3,912 square feet. General plan and zoning compliance and neighborhood compatibility. The general plan designation is El Camino Real Focus Area Community Mixed Use, which is a combination of the community commercial and medium density residential when applied to the El Camino Real Focus Area. The general plan requires ground floor commercial at a minimum of 0.10 FAR unless the project achieves a minimum density of 20 units per acre. The proposed plan that we've been presenting with both the senior and townhomes has a density of 45.1. So that would be greater than 20 units. We wouldn't necessarily have to meet that requirement. That would require us to be a little over 8,000 square feet. But we are including a ground floor commercial space of approximately 3,000 or 3,900, okay, to support the facility. The current zoning for the 2 parcels is Thoroughfare Community Commercial District, CT, which does not allow residential. The Housing Accountability Act, also referred to as the State Density Bonus Law, requires consistency with the general plan, not zoning. And it does not require a rezone. And so what that means is that if you propose a project that is considered a housing project under that state law, you only need to be consistent with the general plan, which our plan is. And AB 3194 allows the city and the applicant to pick a zoning district that best fits the project and is at the same time consistent with the general plan. And in this case, we are proposing a transit-oriented mixed-use combining zoning district, TMU, as this zoning designation is consistent with the general plan and allows the community to have 5 stories, 50 feet, and a density of 45.0 dwelling units per acre. The proposed plan has a density of 45.1, requiring a slight density bonus. The TMU zoning district allows the townhomes and the senior apartments with a height waiver under the state density bonus for the senior apartments. And there's a number of neighborhood compatibility policies that are detailed in the general plan. There's a couple that I picked out here. We've oriented the buildings and the streets to allow for consistency with the city transition goals and policies in general plan chapter 5.5.2. And I'll point a couple of those things out. And again, notwithstanding, it's a narrow, tight site. We tried to position the buildings so that they could be benefit of the circulation plan that would also buffer the buildings from adjacent uses, avail not only convenient access for the ultimate residents, but would also satisfy various agencies' street geometry requirements. So a lot going on, not easy, but we've been working on this for quite some time, and we'll get into more of that, I'm sure, during the Q&A. The proposed land plan will serve as a transition between the more intense development envisioned by the El Camino Real focus area along El Camino and the lower density residents at the rear of the property. What that means and where we're coming from when we make that point is that the senior affordable apartment building is 5 stories, and that cascades down to 3 stories, and in some cases, maybe 44 in the center of the buildings off the edges, if a roof deck option is selected by the buyer. As far as the timing of the community, right now we're in the approval process. We first made an application in December of 2020. We received comments on that submittal in January and February. We worked through addressing those comments with the various agencies. And because we increased the parking and we lost the townhomes, there was a delay in the forward movement of the project from a kind of a deal perspective. That was resolved, and then we began work again. We submitted March and April. It is our goal to achieve a deemed complete status by this summer or early fall. And then, which would be our discretionary approvals, our vesting tentative map, our architectural review, the certification of our secret document that is in process now, and then building permits by second quarter or middle of next year. The construction timelines for the products are as follows. Townhomes, if these assumptions hold, and that's an assumption at this point, we would start construction. This should be next year, 2023 through 2025. So it's about a 2-year construction effort on the townhomes. As far as the senior apartments, what Brendan and Jim may get into later in terms of timing will tell you is that, after a affordable project is entitled, that's when you go out and you seek to secure the necessary financing. You can't really start that process until you have entitlements. And it really depends on what the current climate is for funding at that time. So they could start at the same time as the townhomes, or they could start after the last townhome sold. It's very difficult to control that process. And that's just one of the realities of how affordable housing is financed. But again, we can get into that a little bit more with Brendan and Jim after the presentation. As far as the grand opening and sales, we have third quarter 2023 and fourth quarter 2023 pegged for sales and ground opening. If we were able to start as early as first quarter or second quarter next year. And pre-leasing for the senior apartments could start at the end of 2023 with the grand opening near second quarter of 2024. Final sales townhome, third quarter 2024, and stabilization for the senior apartments by the second quarter 2025. I'm going to conclude my presentation at this time. I want to open it up for questions and comments and let you know that the full submittal is included in the presentation, the architectural drawings, the civil engineering drawings, and the landscape drawings. So with that, I will I'm looking for folks to raise their hand. And once I see your name, if you could just indicate, raise your hand either in the chat box so I can unmute you, and we'll have Sherilyn. Thank you. I see your hand up. Appreciate that. And you are unmuted. Yes, Sherilyn.
Hi, Anthony. Yeah, I messaged you earlier. I have a question regarding on the zoning. Can you go back to the zoning page? Yeah, I understand that you trying to propose a new zoning, which is allow you to build like 45 dwelling in the density. But I just wanted to point out, I think the limit of the story should be like a 4-story and a 50 height limit. So I have questions. So it is like a 4-story limit for the height. So why can't you build a 5-story senior building?
We are building a 5-story senior building.
but I think the new zoning had a height limit, which is 4 stories, not
Mhm.
5 stories.
That's right. And so what we do in that case, so one of the overarching goals, excuse me, of the proposal is trying to provide more affordable housing than the City of Santa Clara inclusionary housing ordinance would otherwise require. And so the goal here is to build 65. And again, I'll open it up to Brendan and Jim because they know more about this than I do. And they'll tell you why it needs to be 5 stories. And what our job is to try to get that approved. And so you're right, Sherilyn, even though that zoning does specify a certain height limit, what we're doing is we're trying to create an opportunity for 65 senior housing units by taking advantage of a waiver that we're entitled based on the state density bonus law. So we are intending, and we've stated in our application to the city, that we'll be seeking a waiver for that height limit. The state density bonus does allow you to go higher. It does allow you to encroach in certain setbacks if you need to. And so in this case, we would be seeking that waiver for the height of the senior building. But why don't we open it up to Brendan and Jim, and they can talk a little bit about why it's important to do 65 units and 5 stories as opposed to less units and a shorter building. Okay. So I'm unmuting Brendan and I'm unmuting Jim. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Sherilyn. There's absolutely a economic reason. With this design includes a podium deck, which is basically a elevated concrete slab. The benefit there is it allows us to provide more parking, but there's a huge cost component with that. And, we really need the additional density to be able to help finance that additional cost, which would provide the additional parking. Just from a general operation standpoint as well, 65 units is very efficient, and these projects are very expensive. There's a lot of additional restrictions that components that we have to include in projects, and really the higher the number of units to spread those fixed costs over, the more efficient. This is very typical that it's very routine that there are increased heights pretty much across the board for 100% affordable projects such as this.
And Sherilyn, are you still raising your hand? I'll unmute you. Thank you, Jim, by the way.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Anthony. Yeah, I understand that you guys are applying for a waiver and it's still in process, right? So we don't know if it is going to be approved or not.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, right now we expect comments back from the city, and we are trying to achieve what we've proposed, and there is a path here. But you're right, nothing's approved at this point. We've just submitted, so this is very preliminary. So this is a great time to make comments. Anything else? Sorry, I think you might have been muted again, Sherilyn. Anything else, Sherilyn?
Yes. Can I ask another question regarding?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I don't see anyone else's hand up. So until I see that.
Sure. For the TMU zoning, I think for the setback, it should be at least 30 feet away from a single family. But yeah, I think you point out earlier saying that there is one place that doesn't meet the requirements. So I just wanted to, can you clarify why we don't follow the rule to setback for 30 feet?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. And it's not because we don't want to, certainly. We're trying to, fit as best we can. But as we Jim just kind of alluded, and what I mentioned previously, when this project was originally proposed, the senior building still had 65 units, but it had 5 parking spaces. And it was not a podium at that time. And it was a less expensive building to build. We were asked to increase parking from 5 to 33 spaces. And so we did that. In order to do that, there's a different construction type that had to be designed. And that's the podium style parking that Jim mentioned that I had on the screen. And this is what you see here. So the footprint of the senior portion of the project increased to the point where we had 26 units. We now have 23. So we lost 3 townhome buildings. And this is essentially the housing product that allows this deal, if you will, this project to be economically feasible. And so we literally can't lose one more. And so this was the only point where, and I know this is near the back of this lot, and that may not be any small consolation, but this was that one point where we absolutely needed to maintain project feasibility was a pinch, if you will. And this is where we don't, the one spot where we don't meet that setback requirement. So what we're doing here is we're actually requesting a waiver for this particular spot under, again, the state density bonus. Let me make sure you're unmuted so you can reply. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. As you can see, I think the 2 corner unit is larger than the middle ones, but why can't you just set back more to fit in the rules? So you still can have the same unit, but just lose a little bit space for the corner unit.
So I think what you're saying is maybe just build a smaller unit.
Yes.
Right? So what I was saying before is that we had 26 units. Those 26 units were actually a little bit bigger. And so at the end of the day, it's math. And so we needed to achieve a minimum total net sellable square footage. And this is it. To go below that jeopardizes our ability and goal together with for future housing to deliver any affordable housing. And so we're at our minimum currently. So it's not necessarily as easy as simply building, smaller units, because with less net sellable square footage, there's less revenue, the costs are the same. And so you quickly get into a situation where you're doing it for practice, and that's challenging economically. And I know that sometimes that's not the most popular thing to say, but those are realities that we certainly have to contend with. And it was difficult after losing those 3 units. And again, and I know that this is the first time that you've looked at this project, but we've been working on this since early 2020. And so this is kind of where we've arrived to date. That doesn't mean that you and I can't continue to talk about your concerns and alternative ways to remedy those.
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of concern on that particular unit. It is very close to my backyard, and I have bedrooms and living rooms on east and the south side. So I think in your design, you also have like a balcony, 2 balconies actually. So it really caused my concerns. I lost my privacy, especially it is very close to my backyard, and your building is much taller than mine. So people can clearly see through my bedrooms, my living rooms. I just feel probably you can do some adjustment, just set it back, lose some space. You still can keep that unit, right? But just set it back. And probably, I don't think we are necessarily need that 12 big windows on the side unit. Can you reduce the windows and for the balcony as well? Because
I think that, yeah, there's probably other things we certainly can do. I'm very open to talking to you about those. It would probably be better to do that one-on-one with a representative from Warmington. Drew, who's on this call, I'm sure would avail himself for that conversation.
Sure.
So I'm sure there's some things that we can continue to talk about, Sherilyn, so that we can address your concerns.
Sure, yeah. So for now, I just have two concerns. One is why we exceed the height limit. The other one is the setbacks. Yeah, that's all my questions.
Okay. I'll make a note of those. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Steve, is I'll contact Sherilyn with Drew very soon after this presentation. We'll copy you so you're kept in the loop, and we'll start working with her. Okay. And you're probably on mute right now, so that was unfair for me to do, but I'm just going to trust it's okay. So height limit and the setback. I understand, Sherilyn. And there's another hand that's up. Sherilyn, thank you. The next speaker is Louis Liu, and I'm asking you to unmute, Louis. Louis, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, there you go. How are you?
Good, good. Hi, Tony, and good evening, everyone. In terms of the development plans you proposed and also posted on the city website, so my family and I also have three primary concerns. So first of all, the building 5, namely the very last townhouse, it is very close to my backyard, actually. So from the graph, you can see the distance from the building to my backyard wall is only 30 feet. So based on the blueprint, it has 5 units. And even if we only consider the second and the third floors, there are still 22 windows and 3 balconies directly facing our house. And the wall of my backyard is less than 6 feet high. And we have the floor to ceiling windows in our living room. So which means we, just like my neighbor pointed out, we won't have privacy anymore. That is my biggest concern. So we really want the project owner can think twice from the viewpoint of the surrounding neighbors and make some changes to the plan, especially the building 5. So that is my biggest concern. Secondly, the day lighting is another big concern. So if you scroll up to the simulation for the daylight, so you can see there. Right. So during the winter time from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., nearly my entire backyard is covered in the shadow, which means we don't have any daylighting the whole day long during the winter time. And just like you pointed out, the simulation is even generated based on 37 feet high for the buildings. However, on page 2, actually, the real height for the townhouse will be 44 instead of 37, which means the situation in the plan is not showing the actual condition. The real situation is gonna be even worse than the simulation. Probably even the summertime, the daylight will be affected as well.
Possibly. What I want to do to clarify this for us, Louis, forgive me, beg your pardon, is that what I'm seeing there, and I'm going to click Mr. Robert Lee to unmute. And so I have a question for Robert. He's the architect, Mr. Liu, of the townhomes. Robert, can you, there he is. Robert, I just saw something and I want to make sure that I'm not misinforming the community. When I see these shadow studies, I see these little, I don't know what you call pop-ups. Isn't that from the top of the mezzanine?
Yeah, could you zoom in a little bit, Tony? Then we could maybe see that a little bit.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking, Mr. Liu, is that these little squares do represent that 44 foot high. But I'm not the architect, so I want to make sure with Mr. Lee's help. Is that right?
Correct. So Mr. Liu, those are the stairwells that leads up to a roof deck. That is an option. And we understand your concern, and we'll definitely take a little bit closer look at those. As far as maintaining your privacy, I think we could also look into our landscape plan and see what kind of landscape screening we're going to be proposing along our side of that wall to help screen and protect your privacy on that north side. So that was always a consideration when we were designing this project, that we wanted to maintain the residents' privacy as best as we can, even though that we're building a taller townhome adjacent to you guys. But we would like to try to maintain those. The number of windows, unfortunately, we have to kind of maintain emergency rescue windows out of the buildings. So it's kind of difficult to reduce the number of windows we have shown there. But we definitely could look at possibility of planting trees in certain designated location between our windows and your backyard to help maybe strategically place the trees so they maintain a little more privacy for your backyard.
And there was another question that I have for Mary, Mary Cardin. I'm going to ask you to unmute Mary. And for the benefit of Mr. Liu, as well as Cheryl Lynn, when I'm looking at your plans here, and I'm due back out on site actually next week, and I've noticed, and you know, Mr. Liu's absolutely right, he should be, he lives there, that the current fencing is pretty low. This purple or this blue line, again, for the benefit of Mr. Liu, what is the anticipated height of that wall, Mary?
I measured the height of the wall is less than 6 feet, actually.
Right. So we're going to, but we're
It's a
proposing,
new,
yeah.
yes. If you look down at the legend on this same sheet, down at the lower left-hand edge of the page, it does say existing masonry wall to remain. So it's not new right now. I mean, we can relook at trying to make something a little higher, but in that just plan east of the property, there are existing high wires. And so I just wanted to be careful, you know, we're limited on planting trees there, but we can definitely plant shrubs that will get up to 12 to 15 feet. I think we're just limited. We just can't call it, yeah, trees are very limited in that height, under the wires. In
The
that
guy wires here? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But so what we'll do, Mr. Liu, and I think what both, you know, Robert Lee of Hesmaholch Architects and Mary Cardin of Vandertunt, they've kind of described this area that we need to respect. There's fire access for windows, and then there's the kind of the height limit for the guy wires, but there's room, right, to work something out. And so that'll probably be the first two things we'll talk about tomorrow morning when we debrief. So, but you said you had 3 concerns, and that's 2. Do you have a third? Let me make sure you're unmuted.
The third one is when you generate the simulation graph, probably can you provide the simulation of the view if you look from the second and the third floor on the building towards us, and also on the opposite, how it looks like from us towards the new building? Otherwise, only using the top view simulation probably cannot show you how severely our privacy is interrupted.
So the short answer is yes, we can. And what we could do, and are you all looking at Google Earth now on my monitor?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to do, don't get sick on me, I'm going to spin you around. And what I would like to do with Mr. Lee's help is do kind of what you're talking to, Mr. Liu, which is to do like what they call a bird's eye perspective from this direction, right? So you can get a sense of how those buildings look from kind of the street level. That's something we can do, right, Robert?
Yes, we could do that. Mr. Liu, is your house the gray roof
Yeah, the
one?
gray roof one.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, so you can see it is very close to the
Right.
building 5, and even we built some trees like 15 feet high.
Mhm.
If the 3-storied home townhouse is 44 feet high, then it is still very hard to cover the privacy. So that
Right.
is still our biggest concern. So I wonder if it is possible that we can replace the building 5 with a clubhouse or some other option, like a 1-story clubhouse, swimming pool, or playground, so that privacy problem can be resolved.
Well, I don't know if we'd be able to do that, but I don't want to say no because that's not my place. You know, what I would like to do is try to solve the problem or the issue. It's not necessarily a problem unless it persists. That's what makes, you know, infill housing a little challenging. But, you know, the team that we've assembled to design this is up to the task. So what I'd like to do, in addition to connecting with Cheryl Lynn very soon, is to do the same with you, if that's okay, so that we can, you know, talk, because there's a lot of details here, and I'm happy to continue talking about those. I don't see that anyone else has hands up. I don't want to neglect anyone else, but I'm happy to. This is not our first infill job. Okay, so these are fairly typical issues, and we know how to resolve them. So you can get, I think my contact information is on the flyer, but I'll make a point to connecting with you. Sherilyn also already has my information, so we're already corresponding. And so I'd like to start that with you as well.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your comment. Sherilyn, do you have your hand up again? No? Okay, I see somebody in the chat room. Yes, I'm going to unmute you, Sherilyn. And I think you're unmuted. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Anthony. Yes, just like Louise mentioned, I also wanted to see the more rendering from the view, actually, from your building 5 and building 4's window to look through to our end. So you just show on the Google map that how it looks like from our buildings towards your project. I just wanted to have like a more rendering, and I also wanted to simulate the view from the building 5 and building 4 through the level 3 to level 3 windows and look to our buildings. As you can see on the Google map, your building 5 and 4 are really close to my house, and all my 3 bedrooms are facing directly to the building 5 and building 4. So that's why my family also very concerned about the privacy. My daughter is living there, and probably we will have like a second child. If I'm nursing in bedroom, yeah, that's really a big concern here.
Understood. No, and I appreciate the comment, and I'm sure we can work it out.
Yeah, so is that possible that we can lower the height of building 5 and building 4, or just the corner unit?
I mean, I will talk with Warmington representatives. Again, the challenge we have is, you know, trying to achieve a certain amount of square footage. I believe there's a way to address your concerns without getting below that minimum threshold. Because as I've stated to Mr. Liu, these are not necessarily novel issues. They're important, we take them seriously, but there are alternative ways of remedying the issue such that your concern is addressed. But we can, and I'm looking forward to getting into this with you so that I can be more specific.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Does anyone else have a question, want to make a comment? What I'm going to do is find Steve. I'm going to unmute you, Steve. And ask a question, and that is, is there anything else that you would think I should address that I haven't?
I don't think so,
Okay.
Tony. You went over the projects. And again, this, this is your meeting. See what else aspects you want to talk about. I think there's only 2 speakers so far. It's good that you're reaching out to them to work with them on this closely as well outside of it. It looks like you may have one more hand.
Yeah, I just saw JAG38. I'm gonna unmute you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Craig. If you don't mind me
You're welcome.
asking, if you don't mind me, your position, are you with the city or with Warmington?
I work for Warmington as a planning consultant.
Okay, understood. I just wanted to say we are actually part of the owners of the 2855 lot that you're discussing right now.
Okay.
And we are pleased to see that the plan, the amount of effort you guys are putting into this plan and the how it's being done in earnest. Concerning the property and the challenges you've discussed economically of making these units and also adjusting and going from 23 down to 26 down to 23 units, sacrificing 3 units in order to fit with as best as you guys can within the state's guidelines. It's appreciative. We're appreciative of that. The concern right now with the property is over the last 3.5 years, we've had to deal with vagrants and vagabonds entering the site and have had to put fencing up to deal with that. And
Right.
so I know that's an effect on the other homeowners in the area, as well as us and the business owners. And as this property's being deliberated over the last 3 years, we've also went from 4 businesses down to 0 businesses currently in that area. These businesses have been paying taxes to the city of Santa Clara commercially since the 70s, and actually property taxes since about 1948. So it's there's many interests involved here. There's the business owners, there's the city's interest in revenues. There's obviously Warmington's interest in making this thing work economically. And so we do find it a little bit interesting that we haven't been informed of these meetings. Is this the first meeting concerning this property or the second?
It is. I thought I mentioned it to Leo, but that was. I thought I did, and if I didn't, certainly apologize. I'm sorry. What is your name?
My name is John.
Hey, John.
I am Leo's nephew.
Okay, right on. Good to meet you. And so that's kind of the purpose of the blanket mailing list, just in case, in our frenetic effort to pull everything together for a presentation, we somehow are remiss in reaching out to people that are important like yourself. They're able to join. And so I'm glad that you were. And like I've mentioned to Sherilyn and Mr. Liu, if ever you need to get a hold of Drew or me, I think my contact information is on the presentation flyer. Always feel free to reach out. I'm very accessible.
That's much appreciated, and I will be sure to. I already made note of that.
Okay.
Mr. Craig, thank you. One other thing that concerning the comments about sunlight that were mentioned. Yeah, it may be 37 to 44 feet that may affect the simulation. I noticed you made comment about how that in the winter, it was around the 21st of the winter.
Yeah.
The last
Dead of winter. Yeah.
Right. The solstice, right around the solstice. And typically in this area, you get about 8 and 3/4 hours of sunlight on that day. And it is a city. That's over the simulation you're showing that provides over 3.5 hours. Actually, yeah, about 3.5 hours of sunlight, 30%. Oh, 3, 6, 9. It's over a third of the day that there'll be sunlight in that area. So I've lived in San Francisco for a while, and that's equivalent to what you're seeing in a major city like that. So
That's a good point.
Thank you. I appreciate the simulation and look forward to any update on that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Drew and I can make sure that we keep you and Leo in the loop as we would anyone. So happy to do that, and always reach out. I'm pretty accessible.
Thank you very much for your time, and everyone else on the meeting as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, John. Brian Shields has his hand up. I'm going to unmute you. Good evening, Mr. Shields.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Doing well. So my name is Brian Shields, and I'm a field rep from the Carpenters Union out of San Jose, local 405. And I'll reach out to you tomorrow likely, but I'd like to pick your brain about how the workers on this job, when they're actually building it, imagine the affordable housing section of it will be on a prevailing wage, but how the townhomes here won't turn into, I'm not saying that this particular project or this particular group, Warmington Group or anybody, but won't turn into another crime scene that we see everywhere else. So not to be accusatory, I don't mean it that way.
No, I mean, I hope the same.
Right. So I do see your contact information here on Tony at AJ Craig Dev.
That's me.
I'll reach out to you tomorrow, and okay. I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for any other hands. And so I guess while I don't see hands, I'll unmute you, Jim, to comment on the prevailing wage requirement for the funding. Is there such a requirement?
Yeah, that really depends on the financing. It's too premature to know what financing it is. I'd say most of the projects we're doing are prevailing wage, but it really is specific to the individual funding sources. We really need to have the entitlements done before we can really track down those sources. Most of them are highly competitive, and it takes time. So it's definitely too early to tell on that aspect.
Okay, no, that makes sense, and that was kind of consistent with what we were mentioning to Cheryl, that you guys can't even go out and do what you would prefer to do until this process is over, and we're just getting into this particular process now, so time will tell there. I don't see any other hands. I think what I'd like to do, and I'm happy to answer more questions if anyone has any. I'd like to wrap it up. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I will look forward to getting in contact with Sherilyn, Mr. Liu, and Mr. Shields. We can chat about their concerns and what's on their mind. But if there's anything else from anyone else that attended tonight that occurs to you after the presentation, feel free to contact me, and look forward to speaking with you. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation and the town. We got one chat. Okay, it was a thank you from Mr. Shields. You're very welcome, sir. Look forward to chatting with you. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I'd like to close the community Zoom for 2855 for the moment. Okay, Mr. Liu has one more quick question. I am going to unmute you. Go ahead, Mr. Liu.
Yes, Tony, sorry, just one quick question. So for all of the questions my neighbor and I asked today, and all of the concerns we presented, so how we are gonna follow up the future discussion and the future plan? Are we gonna follow up by email, or we're gonna have another hearing, or?
So as far as your specific issue, so number one, this is a recorded Zoom. So everything that was shown and said is recorded, right? So it's been memorialized that way. So no one has to recreate memory. Both Drew and I have made very careful notes. Again, your concerns are not atypical. We're versed in addressing those, especially with the team that we have assembled here for this project. And so as it relates to the next steps with you, I would like you to email me tonight.
Okay.
I have Sherilyn's information. I'll be reaching out to her directly tomorrow. So if we can establish, contact info exchange, I can reach out to you tomorrow and we can kind of lay out the next steps and, what we can do. So I'd like to start that right away.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so I'm doing this slowly on purpose because just in case someone has another comment or question, but I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much. This is recorded. Steve, how would people access this? Will this meeting and the recording of it be available to people on the city website?
Yes, Tony. So if you can save this video, send it to me tomorrow, and we will upload this and the presentation on the city webpage for this project.
Okay, will do. Again, everyone, thank you. Have a great evening, and feel free to contact me or Drew at any time during this process that we look forward to going through with all of you. Thank you. Have a good night.